Welcome. Now you are going to listen to a ReputationUP podcast. Let's get started. WorldCheck Risk Intelligence, the definitive guide. This is the most comprehensive guide on the web about WorldCheck Risk Intelligence. The best part? I will show you exactly how the database works and what the lists are, through a series of unpublished screenshots of the customer area. If you want to find out how to unsubscribe from WorldCheck and how banks use it to combat financial crimes, you will love this guide. What is WorldCheck? WorldCheck is a huge database, a sort of digital database with all your personal data. Banks around the world use it as a risk intelligence tool. Objective: to measure the financial reputation of an individual or a company. Are your name or brand on the WorldCheck lists? Bad: you cannot open an account or have access to credit. The story. The true story of WorldCheck, the one that no one has yet told you, revolves around three main protagonists and really has an incredible value. Let's see in detail who designed, developed and finally purchased WorldCheck. 1. David Leppen. David Leppen is the South African entrepreneur who came up with the idea of creating WorldCheck. In fact, he is one of the most powerful men in the world, since he knows the secrets of other influential and very rich men. During an interview with the New York Times, Leppen revealed the background that led to the birth of WorldCheck. I created WorldCheck with my ex-wife in 2000. I was 24 years old, I worked for Thomson Financial and I was sales manager in Liechtenstein, Luxembourg, and Austria. At the time, there was a Swiss banking scandal over money transfers by the Nigerian general Sani Abacha. I was on a business trip and several major banks began to ask us if Thomson Financial had an early warning database to help them understand the financial risks associated with their clients around the world. At that moment I saw an opportunity and within a few months I created our company with the online database. 2. Nicolas Kimla. If David Leppen was the mastermind, Nicolas Kimla was the arm of WorldCheck. Through his company Uptime Technology has developed the entire IT platform that supports the WorldCheck database. Austrian by birth, Kimla still deals, among other things, with programming and updating ever better versions of the database. 3. Thomson Reuters. When a great idea is supported by a computer structure that works wonderfully, the market value skyrockets. Especially considering that today data is worth more than money. Outcome: on May 17, 2011, media giant Thomson Reuters, TRI, announced the purchase of WorldCheck, a London-based provider of information on financial crime and corruption prevention for businesses. Today the Financial and Risk Division of Thomson Reuters, which includes WorldCheck, is called Refinitiv. The new company is controlled by the Blackstone Group, which in February 2018 acquired 55% of Thomson Reuters F&R for a record $20 billion. We are talking about the largest digital financial intelligence database in the world. The databank. Immediately after the birth of WorldCheck, in 2000, the September 11th attacks overwhelmed and diverted the course of global history. From that day the priority of each bank and financial institution on the face of the earth was to prevent financial risks and reputational crises on money movements related to Islamic terrorism. And guess who they were talking to? That's right, at WorldCheck, which at the time was the standard for anti-money laundering security. It could not be otherwise, given that the company's main consultant was Kenneth Rijak, better known as the Laundry Man, an international, repentant, money laundering guru. Over the years the WorldCheck Thomson Reuters database has become the main due diligence provider in terms of KYC, Know Your Customer, and PEP, politically exposed persons, regarding individuals and entities with high financial risk. Banks, credit and insurance financial institutions, government and intelligence services use WorldCheck's filing and database to target crimes related to terrorism, drug trafficking, money laundering, arms and human trafficking. To satisfy even the needs of smaller institutions and smaller companies, which do not have a team or the appropriate know-how for a manual check, Since 2005, WorldCheck has used software called Pythagoras, which automatically filters the names stored in the database and based on a series of preset parameters. To understand us, it is a software also used by the Mediobanca Group. How the WorldCheck database works. The operation of the WorldCheck database is quite simple. The system sucks data and news related to a possible financial risk from sources it deems reliable, on entities and individuals. It then classifies these entities and individuals by profiles, based on the associated crime category, and places the profiles on the notorious lists. In this mechanism, which may seem perfect, there is a basic flaw. Often the sources considered authoritative are actually garbage. Access and log into the customer area. To log into the WorldCheck customer area, just connect to the official website and enter your credentials. Obviously, access to the database goes through a rigorous verification process and the mandatory signing of a non-disclosure agreement, NDA. Once inside, you will be faced with the largest mass cataloging on the planet. Scrolling through the lists, you will find both real and alleged criminals who ended up there by mistake. What are the filing criteria? All politically exposed individuals or entities who carry out suspicious transactions, within the limits of anti-money laundering legislation, end up in the WorldCheck database. The data are extrapolated from over 100,000 respectable public sources, credible and reputable open-source information, and are inserted in the central database managed by Refinitiv. More specifically, WorldCheck analyzes and catalogs the so-called public domain data, that is, personal information available to the public and generally on the Internet, in 240 countries worldwide and 65 languages. What are the sources of WorldCheck? The respectable sources from which WorldCheck captures your data are penalties or checklists, websites of judicial, regulatory or other authorities, political websites, parliamentarians, local government or individual politicians, and publications, reliable media and publications, sources of information made public by the person himself, website, blog or social media. Welcome to the fantastic digital world, where there is a trace of whatever you do. Where the third-generation mafia offspring, on nulla tenente paper, get caught for a selfie by the yacht. There is always someone watching you on the internet. What is a WorldCheck report and what data it contains? By WorldCheck report we mean a personal or business card, present in the database, which contains the following data. Category. Subcategory. Creation date. Social security number. First name. Surname. Alias. Names. Alternative aliases. Date of birth. Certificate of death. Further information. Passport. Identity card. Company numbers. Source references. Citizenship. How much does a WorldCheck report cost? Calculating a priori how much a WorldCheck report costs is not possible, given that the variables involved are many and different from each other. It is necessary to evaluate case by case. It is not like buying apples at the supermarket, which cost a lot per kilo. I can tell you, however, that thanks to ReputationUP you will be able to know for sure if your name or company is listed in some list. What are the WorldCheck categories? Let's see in detail all the 23 categories that make up the immense Refinitiv database. 1. Bank. This category includes Shell Bank, central banks of countries at risk, state banks, banks subject to regulatory action or sanctions, unauthorized and/or bogus financial institutions disguised as banks. 2. Blacklisted. This category includes any entity on the blacklist of internationally and/or regionally recognized control bodies, for example World Bank. Airplanes and airlines blacklisted in the EU. 3. Countries. All nations reported as such by World Bank, IMF, FATF, UN and EU, Embargo, are considered at high risk. 4. Companies. The WorldCheck companies category covers all legal, commercial or state entities, including loose and find entities, that are present on regulatory sites or official sanctions such as OFAC, ONU, SEC, UK FSA, US FRB. 5. Crime, financial. This category includes any person found guilty or convicted for misappropriation, theft, fraud, money laundering, extortion, corruption, tax evasion, other financial, economic and property crime offenses. 6. Crime, narcotics. In this category you find persons found guilty or convicted of drug trafficking, individuals sanctioned or reported as international drug traffickers according to Kingpin Act. 7. Crime, organized. This category includes every person found guilty or convicted of crimes related to or are related to any organized crime group, for example Solonsevskaya Bratva, Yakuza, Camorra, Androngeta, Sinaloa Cartel and many others. 8. Crime, war. Any person found guilty or convicted of crimes against humanity, genocide or war crimes falls into this category. 9. Crime, other. All persons found guilty or convicted of offenses alleged by FAFT-GAFI fall into other categories of crime. 10. Diplomatic. By diplomat we mean every individual who holds the position of ambassador, minister, minister-counselor, attaché, lobbyist, consul general, honorary consulate, consuls. 11. Embargo. The embargo category indicates all those countries or regions subject to sanctions or embargoes by international bodies such as the UN and the EU. 12. Ship embargo. A ship ends up in this category when it has received the order not to sail from or not to dock at the port of the state in which it is located for reasons of embargo. 13. Individual. The individual category is one of the most controversial, since it often lists innocent people who do not deserve this type of media pillory. The list includes any person accused, investigated, arrested, indicted, detained, interrogated or subjected to trial for crimes related to WorldCheck but not yet convicted. PEP individual, politically exposed person. Individual who appears in a list of law enforcement, OFAC, Interpol or is reported as disqualified directors. Close relative of a PEP individual. 14. Legal. Among the legal professionals involved in risk-related activities and accused of fraud we find lawyers, magistrates, judges, general prosecutors, other PEP legal professionals. 15. Military. This category includes high-level military personnel, PEP, and military officers, non-PEP, reported due to the risk of preventive sentencing related to the military role. 16. Organization. Among the organizations listed on WorldCheck you will find United Nations agencies or regional bodies of the European Union, foundations, religious institutions, financial services authority, security and exchange fees, university. 17. Political individual. The individual political category includes any person who holds or held a political position, any person who has been elected to a government or PEP position, any politically exposed person in a country where cabinet ministers, secretaries of state and the like are appointed and not elected, for example, kingdom or military state. Every leader of a political party. 18. Political party. In this WorldCheck list, every registered political party that participates in the elections or is active in a specific country appears. 19. Port and airport. The seaports and airports reported on the Refinitiv database are those located in a country or region listed as having a financial or commercial embargo, including asset freezing, arms embargo or sanctions against them issued by an internationally recognized organization, for example UN, EU. 20. Religion. Any influential religious leader, or representative of a religious organization, with political, judicial, military, financial and administrative responsibilities is likely to see his name on the WorldCheck religion list. To understand, there is also Pope Francis. 21. Terrorism. The category of terrorism includes any person or entity arrested for terrorist offenses, any person or entity suspected of involvement in terrorist or terrorism-related activities, any person or entity convicted of terrorist offenses, any person or entity identified as wanted nationally or internationally by OFAC, UN, Interpol, FBI, CIA, Europol and others. 22. Trade union. Any trade union that exercises substantial political influence or pressure and regularly mobilizes a large group of people engaged in industrial unrest is listed on worldcheck. 23. Ship. By ship is meant any non-embargoed or non-sanctioned seagoing ship which is directly or indirectly linked to or associated with a country, region or entity subject to an embargo or sanction. Maritime ship of special interest which is not directly linked to or associated with an embargoed country, region or entity but which carries related information or other relevant risk information. What are the world checklists? Each category has a world checklist. All world checklists contain a list of names and acronyms of people or entities that, for the reasons explained in the previous chapter, are filed after careful verification. Even if the example is very risky, the most critical compare them to the lists of P2, therefore to lists of powerful figures who, in direct or indirect relationship with each other, commit crimes against the state and against property. Particularly relevant are the world checklists on anti-money laundering and terrorist financing. How world checklists work. Why can an individual or entity undergo a category change and switch from one list to another? To answer, I will give a concrete example. Example: individual, political or diplomatic individual. If a person is accused of an offense related to world check but is not yet convicted, he will be listed in the individual, political or diplomatic individual category, as appropriate, until the possible conviction. After any conviction, that same person will undergo a category change and will be classified in the list of the appropriate crime category. If the sentence was cancelled on appeal, that same person would return to the initial category. Therefore, the discriminant of a change of category and list is the possible conviction of the person. Please note that for the initial filing a simple charge of crime by those control bodies of which I spoke in the chapter on the categories of world check is enough. World check leak, when the lists go online. World check leak has been talked about every time the lists in the database have ended up online, and therefore available for download by any human being, including hackers, with a decent internet connection. Allow me to point out that since the Thomson Reuters Financial and Risk Division, owner of WorldCheck, was acquired by the Blackstone Group and changed its name to Refinitiv, there have been no more cases of leak and stolen data. Let's now look at the most striking and acclaimed case of WorldCheck leak. The 2016 leak. How the WorldCheck database works was understood on Thursday, June 28, 2016, when Chris Vickery, an American cybersecurity expert, wrote a post on Reddit. Terrorism blacklist, I have a copy. Should it be shared? In a few hours the news of the WorldCheck leak goes around the world. Every hacker on the face of the earth sees the concrete possibility of downloading a list made up of 2.2 million people identified as high risk, included in the WorldCheck database between March 17, 2000 and September 17, 2014. We are talking about information whose use, until then, was the exclusive prerogative of 49 of the 50 largest banks in the world, together with 300 government and intelligence agencies. WorldCheck Italy, the Italian names on the list. The 2016 leak also brought up a sort of WorldCheck Italia, namely the Italian names on the list. Some were disclosed by an article by Stefano Morizzi on Repubblica, including Pope Francis, Sergio Mattarella, Silvio Berlusconi, Matteo Renzi, Beppe Grillo, Luca Cossarini, Casa Pound, New Brigade Rossa, Informal Anarchist Federation. How banks and companies use WorldCheck. 1. WorldCheck 1 is a tool used by international companies, banks, financial and credit institutions to efficiently select customers, collaborators, transactions and employees and avoid potential risks. How? Simple: if a customer is reported as suspect by WorldCheck to the bank, further checks will be carried out and his application may be rejected. This process serves to ensure that customers or other members associated with the bank have never been involved in any form of money laundering, political exposure or other illegal activities. Once the customer passes the check screens imposed by WorldCheck, he will then be approved as a bank customer and will be able to make financial transactions. To combat financial crimes, banks use 3 WorldCheck tools. 1. Anti-money laundering. According to the 2018 Revealing the True Cost of Financial Crime report, nearly 50% of global companies have experienced at least one financial crime in the past 12 months. Aggregate total losses, $1.45 trillion. To understand it, the trillion is the one that has 12 zeros and written in full becomes 1,450 billion. We are talking about a figure higher than that of the entire GDP of a large European nation like Spain, GDP 2017, $1.3 trillion. Money laundering grows hand in hand with financial crimes, since stolen money, to be spent, needs to be cleaned up and washed. Faced with a scam of such proportions, the world's governmental institutions that deal with economics and finance certainly don't stand by. The AML, anti-money laundering, regulatory strategy is to share an ever-increasing amount of information and data to prevent financial crime. Unfortunately, however, state bureaucracy is often slow, cumbersome and devoid of the most advanced technological tools to win the war against the bad guys. Here comes WorldCheck 1, the anti-money laundering solution for professionals, launched by Thomson Reuters in 2014. The operation is relatively simple. The database collects all the data from the sources we mentioned before and, through a screening program, simplifies the search for individuals, companies and states reported, accused or convicted of money laundering. 2. Anti-terrorism. Counterterrorism means the fight against terrorist financing, the enormous flow of money that feeds the great machine of global terror every year. Among the illicit activities whose funds are used to finance terrorist organizations, we find drug trafficking, black oil market, facade companies such as car and taxi rental, cybercrime. Just think that ISIS in 2014, its period of maximum expansion, invoiced $50 million a month only from the illegal sale of oil and boasted an annual turnover of over $2 billion. Keep in mind that almost 200 terrorist organizations recognized as such by the authorities are all self-financing by committing financial crimes and laundering dirty money. The Italian Secret Services also wrote about the relationship between money laundering, and money dirtying, financing for terrorism, in the magazine Gnosis, underlining that, according to World Bank data, in 2006, total transactions made through money transfers worldwide were $93 billion. There is no doubt that, through these centers, capital travels to terrorist organizations. Internationally, the regulatory vademecum for the prevention and contrast of terrorist financing is the International Convention Against the Financing of Terrorism of December 8, 1999. Basically, if the control bodies of the United Nations and the European Union designate a person guilty of activities in support of countries that threaten international peace and security, the same person suffers the freezing of funds and economic resources. And here WorldCheck 1 comes into play, as an efficient and immediate screening tool to find any traces of terrorist financing. The database collects all data from official sources and makes them available to customers who need to read that data. After all, are we or are we not in the era in which information is worth more than gold? For Refinitiv, this information is worth $6 billion, i.e. the company's turnover in 2018. 3. Due diligence. The expression due diligence derives from the Latin debitur diligentia and literally means due diligence. In the case of WorldCheck, it concerns the process of investigation and analysis of data and information relating to any financial or economic operation. Let's follow a concrete example. Company X asks for a $300 million loan from Bank Y. Well, Bank Y will use WorldCheck to fulfill due diligence obligations and identify any entities or entities that have committed financial crimes and that are connected to Company X. Objective: to minimize any financial risk, therefore any loss of money due to a company that asks for a lot of money and then may not be able to return it. At that point, Bank Y has all the necessary information to decide whether to grant the loan or not and to bear the financial risk of Company X. Through the screening platform of WorldCheck 1, it is possible to create advanced due diligence reports that provide you with everything you need to know before doing business with someone. Whose WorldCheck is it? Yes, it is true. At the beginning of the guide we briefly told who founded and developed WorldCheck and that Thomson Reuters, acquired by the Blackstone Group, is now called Refinitiv. Very well. But who is behind these acronyms? Who controls your data? To understand who is behind the largest database in the world, we have adopted the best investigative strategy that has ever existed: follow the money. What is Refinitiv? Refinitiv is the company that manages WorldCheck today. Born in 2018, it is the result of a joint venture between Blackstone Group Lp, which holds the majority stake, 55%, and Thomson Reuters, which has the minority stake, 45%. Ergo your data is in hand, with the due percentages, to Blackstone Group and Thomson Reuters. Who controls Thomson Reuters? Let's start with the minority share. Thomson Reuters Corporation is a Canadian multinational listed on the New York and Toronto Stock Exchanges, TRI. Its shares are held by a number of institutional investors and mutual funds including Royal Bank of Canada, Vanguard Group Incorporated, Parnassus Fund, JP Morgan ETF TR Beta Builders Canada ETF and others. President and CEO of TRI is James Clifton Smith Jim, who is also a member of the Pfizer board and the World Economic Forum. Who controls Blackstone Group? And we come to those who hold the majority stake of Refinitiv, therefore of WorldCheck, and therefore of the data present in the database. The Blackstone Group, LP. It is a killer whale of world finance, with assets under management of over $457 billion. The equivalent of the GDP of 3 countries like Bolivia, Colombia, and Ecuador combined. It has significant shares in globally recognized groups, including Hilton Worldwide, Thomson Reuters, Versace. But who controls Blackstone Group? The company is listed on the New York Stock Exchange, BX, and among the owners of its shares we find institutional investors, such as Swedbank, Renaissance Investment Group, Tocqueville Asset Management LP- and several U.S. funds, Income Fund of America Incorporated, American Balanced Fund, Growth Fund of America Incorporated, American Funds Insurance Air Asset. Chairman, CEO and co-founder is Stephen Alan Schwarzman, former CEO of Goldman Sachs, current member of the Board on Council on Foreign Relations and the World Economic Forum. Interestingly, the U.S. government also has its own representative on the BX board. I'm talking about Kelly Ayotte, Republican senator from New Hampshire from 2011 to 2017. How to unsubscribe from WorldCheck? To fully answer this question, allow me to consider a case study, that of the Finsbury Park Mosque against Thomson Reuters, which highlighted the reputational damage suffered by those who are mistakenly added to the WorldCheck database. The case of the Finsbury Park Mosque. The Finsbury Park Mosque is located in North London, a short walk from the Emirates Stadium. Inaugurated in 1993, in the presence of Prince Charles of England, in several circumstances it ended up in the eye of the media hurricane because it was suspected of financing terrorism. On the basis of these, and other, accusations, in 2003 she was forced to close its doors for 2 years. Reopening came in 2005 and today it is among the most active Islamic realities in England. In terms of WorldCheck, the case of the mosque becomes interesting when, it is 2014, HSBC, one of the most important banking groups in the world, closes the bank account of Finsbury Park and prevents it from opening other accounts in other associated banks. The mosque avoids financial collapse only thanks to the intervention of a small Islamic banking institution. What had caused the blockade? The presence of the mosque in the WorldCheck database, used by HSBC for KYC profile and due diligence in order to avoid customers who do not comply with anti-money laundering and anti-terrorism regulations. The problem is that the Finsbury Park fact sheet on WorldCheck was based on news prior to the reopening and rebirth of the mosque, therefore on obsolete news, no longer updated or truthful. The mosque, supported by a reputable online company, decides to wage a long battle with Thomson Reuters to ask for the deletion of his profile from the database. Result: in 2017 the mosque wins the battle and sees its right to be forgotten and her privacy recognized. In summary, we can say that WorldCheck fed on harmful news that nobody had thought of removing from the web, triggering a reputational crisis with disastrous financial consequences. That's why, even before finding out how to unsubscribe from WorldCheck, and in order to prevent crisis management, it is essential to remove obsolete content from the web that can damage or compromise your image. How to unsubscribe from WorldCheck? The case of the mosque shows that 1. You can unsubscribe from WorldCheck. It can be done in an absolutely legal way, without imagining teams of hackers who pierce the database. Provided, however, to be followed by an online reputation company such as ReputationUP, which internally has qualified figures both from a technological and legal point of view, with a thorough knowledge of the right to be forgotten and GDPR. 2. It is always better to be safe than sorry. We need to dry up the sources to which WorldCheck drinks, removing the pretext to report you on the database. How? Just delete those negative online links from which government and official sources feed, which then end up being news of crime according to WorldCheck. So, if you really want to delete your name from WorldCheck, avoid giving credit to companies that promise memorabilia and entrust it to serious and qualified professionals of the sector such as those you find in the ReputationUP team. When it is possible to unsubscribe from WorldCheck. According to Andrea Baggia, CEO and founder of ReputationUP, it is possible to unsubscribe from WorldCheck in 8 out of 10 cases. 80% of the profiles on Refinitive's database are based on old, obsolete, harmful, defamatory and contrary to the GDPR principle in Europe and its US equivalent. Then you can update them or remove them entirely. In fact, when sensitive personal data is processed without consent and without satisfying only one of the exemptions provided by the privacy guarantor or by the Data Protection Authority, DPA, there is a real risk that the data is processed illegally. At this point, a company like ReputationUP takes the field, verifying if your name is on the list, if your profile is illegal. What is the path to request the deletion or updating of the profile? As in the case of the Finsbury Park Mosque. Based on current privacy laws, the right to be forgotten and the retention of sensitive data, you are entitled to request a complete copy of all your profile information on WorldCheck. Request the updating and correction of this information if you think it is incorrect or incomplete. Request the deletion of the profile. How do I check if my name is on the list? This is the easiest and fastest part. Fill in this form and ReputationUP will check, with speed and discretion, if your name is on the list. You have a team of reputational and legal experts who can assist you if you want to assert your right to be forgotten, in compliance with the GDPR and according to the legal lines established by the privacy guarantor. WorldCheck versus others. Dow Jones Risk and Compliance. With the exception of the Sport Intelligence Tool, an ad hoc tool for those sports organizations that want to monitor risk in relation to an event, the Dow Jones Risk and Compliance works as a WorldCheck. It is a business data provider and collects information through a system called Factiva, a news aggregator that analyzes over 32,000 sources, paper and online newspapers, magazines, televisions, radio broadcasts, photos, videos, in 28 languages. We are very far from the figures of WorldCheck, 100,000 sources, 240 countries, 64 languages. World Compliance. World Compliance online search tool was born under the hat of RealX plc, the British public company that first acquired LexisNexis, legal financial database, and then Acuity, financial reputation company. They claim to manage a database with 1.8 million profiles, of which it is possible to have a total screening for 50 risk categories, including foreign officials and state enterprises. It is not clear or specified in detail which and how many sources World Compliance uses for the listing of profiles. OFAC. Unlike the other competitors, which are private companies, the OFAC, Office of Foreign Assets Control, is a United States financial intelligence agency that applies economic and commercial sanctions to enemies of the United States, i.e. to entities and individuals who they threaten national security and foreign policy. The most interesting aspect is that OFAC offers a public search tool called the Sanction List Search. From the tool it is possible to download both the SDN list, specially designated nationals and blocked persons list, and the non-SDN list, all individuals belonging to the Palestinian Legislative Council, a sort of Palestinian parliament. The others. The data market is so vast that it includes dozens of competitors, not all of which deserve particular attention. For the more curious, I recommend taking a look at the complete list of data providers and screening software published by Eric Ason on MrWatchlist.com. Conclusions. If you want to prevent a screening system like WorldCheck from collecting false and outdated information about you, causing you huge financial problems like closing a bank account, freezing your assets and being unable to move your money freely, take care of your online reputation. And delete negative content from the web before it ends up in the WorldCheck database. We at ReputationUP thank you for listening to this podcast. Until next time.